Right, but guys, let's get started. Whoops, sorry, it was a bit of an aggressive scroll. What we're going to do is we're going to just chat about what we already know so that we can start to formalize this into the specific way that we write rules and the way we work with number patterns and notation, or the way we write things. Okay, so if we have a look at this table, we've got our inputs and we've got our outputs, and we want to essentially figure out what this pattern is. Now remember, when you're wanting to work out a pattern, you are wanting to look at your output values. So you want to figure out what is the pattern between these numbers listed in your output. So if you need to, you can always write it as a list. So 1, -2, -5, -8. And you want to figure out what that pattern is. So I'm going to give you guys like 10 seconds. Oh, sorry, I had to sneeze. Give you guys 10 seconds to have a look at your pattern and tell me what it is that you're doing to get from one to the next. So in the chat, I just want to know, what are you doing to get from one output value to the next output value? So essentially, if you're a bit confused, what I'm essentially asking you to do is answer for me this very first question. Describe the pattern. What is happening in this number pattern? You can do it in words, Watobe. You can just put it on the chat as simple as you can. I'm not too stressed at this moment. What I want, though, is what is the pattern? Right, guys, very nice. All right, so what we're doing is we're subtracting 3. So if we go from 1 to -2, I subtract 3. -2 to -5, I subtract 3. And what I see is that that pattern continues. And so if we wanted to continue this pattern, I could just keep subtracting 3. So I could subtract 3 and I could get -11. I could subtract 3 and I could get -14, and I could keep going. But excuse me, the whole point of number patterns is generally we don't just want to extend this pattern. We want to know the value of a specific term in a specific position. So I could ask you, what is the value of the term in the 78th position? Now, you don't want to extend this pattern until you've written out 78 terms. And this is why we find rules or general formulas of patterns. And this is essentially what we have been doing and what we're going to get into now today. All right, so we know what our rule is. We're subtracting 3. If you're describing this rule as you are adding -3, absolutely fine. It means the same thing. So either you're describing this pattern as subtracting 3, or you are saying you are adding -3. Either one, absolutely fine. You get to where you need to be. Just a reminder, guys, I can't remember if you said it. Clearly, it's been a long hour. Remember that all of the lessons are recorded. So if you miss anything, if you need to go back and rewatch some of the lessons, they are all recorded for you on Watobe's website. All right, so now that we know what our rule is, hopefully that means that we can start to find rules that we can use to find any term. So you'll see the second question, question B, is it says find the missing value for the input value of 10. So essentially we're talking about this column over here. We want the 10th term. Now, one way we could do that is we could keep extending the pattern. So I've got the first term, the second term, the third term, the fourth term. I've worked out the fifth and the sixth term because we were having a conversation about it. So if I wanted to, I could keep subtracting 3 and I could find the 10th term. So the 7th term would be -17. The 8th term would be -20. Let's just do this. The 9th term would be -23. And the 10th term we would get as -26. So we could just keep going and find our 10th term. That's fine. The problem is, like I say, what happens if I'd given you an input value of 70 or 92 or 123? You don't want to write that pattern all the way out. You want a quick way to get there. And that quick way to get to a specific term that you want to get to is by determining a rule for your pattern. If you can find a rule for your pattern that applies to any term, it means that you can, like I say, find any term in this pattern. Now, I'm hoping that because we have chatted about this a little bit, excuse me, this isn't too new, but we're going to take it slowly for this first one and then practice a little bit more in our second example. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to write out some steps that we can follow to hopefully find a rule. And this is all from what we have already spoken about in previous lessons, which is why I was reminding you to go watch the videos. But let's have a look. So the first thing that we always do is we need to figure out what the pattern is. Now, we've already done that. Remember, we said right at the start that clearly subtracting 3 is quite important in this pattern. That is the whole pattern. If we describe it in words, that's exactly what we said. So that is where we start. So our very first step is we multiply the input value, which is x, by whatever we are adding or subtracting. I'm just going to do shorthand. So in this case, whatever we're adding or subtracting is the -3, and we got that from looking at our pattern. What we now want to do is we want to multiply x by it. So we want to say x times -3, which gives us -3x. That's only half of it. We haven't finished getting our rule. The next thing that we want to do is we want to find out what we need to still add or subtract to this product to get the desired output. So find what needs to be added or subtracted. It could be either to the product to get the output we want. Whoops, sorry, wasn't supposed to happen. Now, when I say the output we want, what I mean is the values that was given in our table. So the outputs that we want are these outputs that I was given in my table here, essentially the pattern that it was that I was looking at. And then I just took the whole thing off because that's apparently the type of day we're having. Okay, so there we go. The output that we want is in my table. I can see that in my table. So I need to go from my product to my desired output. So let's have a look. If we take our first input of 1, so x equals 1, because remember, that is the x value, and we times it by the -3. -3 times 1. Why am I doing that? Because that's the first part of my rule. I'm just going to go up here. -3 times +1 is -3. But remember, my desired output that I want is +1. So my question is, how do I get from -3 to +1? What do I need to add or subtract to that? Okay, well, let's think about our number line. Here, oh, that's a terrible number line. Let's try that again. It didn't get any better, but we'll just pretend it did. So here I am at -3. I need to get to +1. Now, if I'm going to the right on my number line, I'm adding. So I'm going to add a certain number. 1, 2, 3, 4. I am adding 4 to get from -3 to +1. And so what this does is it gets me my rule. My rule is now telling me that to get an output value, I need to say -3 times x, but I still then need to add 4 to it in order to get my output. What I always want to do though, sorry, I just want to make that a touch smaller because I'm running out of space here. I always want to check my rule. So my last step is to check the rule and make sure that it does actually work for all of my values. So when I check my rule, this is now where I go to my next input. So let's take the input now of 2. So if I've got x equals 2, I need to put that into my rule. So y equals -3x plus 4. -3 times 2 is equal to -6, and -6 plus 4 is -2. That is the output that I wanted, so my rule is correct. So this rule that I've got of y is equal to -3x plus 4 is correct for this number pattern. All right, so this is how we essentially go and find our algebraic rule for a pattern. So I'm going to wait here for you to take screenshots. This is also your opportunity to ask me questions. Teto, I'm not too sure what you mean for your format. You can raise your hand and let me know. You can put it on the chat. Yeah, just why is your format different? What does yours look like that's different to mine?
Raise your hand, Teto, so you can explain. And anyone else who is feeling a little bit confused about this, please, now is your time where you can ask questions, okay?
Teto, honestly, excuse me, for now, that's fine. You're getting the rule across. Technically speaking, we would try and simplify the x times -3 to -3x, but you'll get there. You've got the rule across. It's okay for now. You'll eventually start automatically simplifying it. Wanle?
Hi, ma'am. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm good, ma'am. And there's something I don't quite understand, right? So when I took my calculator, right? So I said 2 minus -3x plus 4, and it gave me. Ma'am, can I check? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So, ma'am, I said 2 negative. Should I put the -3 in brackets?
Yes.
Okay, 2 negative.
So it's 2 times -3.
Oh, -3 plus 4.
Plus 4.
Oh, ma'am, now I get it. I did not, I was not multiplying.
Okay, so guys, that's really important. If you're going to check, and I would do exactly what Lawanda has done, I would just use my calculator. Don't write it out. Remember that you are multiplying the x value and the coefficient. So you need to remember to either use brackets or to times the two values together. Otherwise, yeah, you're going to get a funny answer. But well done on recognizing that. Just quickly on the chat, Zimmy, we times the x by 2 to check. You didn't have to times it by 2 if you wanted to check with another input. Say, for example, if you wanted to make x 3, you would then times the -3 by +3. You're just checking certain inputs. Nkululeko? Should be a pop-up to unmute yourself. Oh, my nose. There we go. Yeah.
Nkululeko, I'm not sure if you can hear us, but your network at this moment is really, really bad on my side. Teacher Sam, were you able to hear Nkululeko?
Ma'am, there's something I want to ask. Ma'am, we say that the rule is saying subtract 3, but you.
You can speak, Nkululeko.
Ma'am.
Yeah.
Ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am. Yeah.
Okay, Nkululeko, we're not able to hear you. I'm not too sure what's happening. please put your question in the chat. I think I know what you're trying to ask. And if it's not this, then you need to put your question on the chat. So we said our description of our pattern is subtracting 3. So that was just the start of it if I wanted to describe it in words. However, describing a pattern in words and doing an algebraic rule. So there's two different things. There's a description in words and there's an algebraic rule. Those are two different things. They're going to look different, okay? So our description in words is going to help us find our algebraic rule, but it's not the same thing. That subtraction of 3 is where we start off. So that's why we multiplied the x by what we added or subtracted. That's our starting point, but there is more to it. So that's why we need to follow these steps to find our rule. But if that wasn't your question, please put it in the chat and we will help you. And we'll figure out whatever it is that you're a little bit confused by. All right, guys, I hope you all took screenshots though. We're gonna have a look at another one. Okay, so here we go. Let's just take this out. Clearly I'm losing my mind. If we have a look at this pattern, once again, first thing that we want to do, what the first question's asking us is describe it in words. So this is just our starting point. It's not the whole rule. We haven't finished. We just want to first describe this pattern. Oh, can't highlight. I can't do anything tonight. Okay, didn't get any better. Whatever. So look at your output values and we want to know what the pattern is. So I'm going to give you 2 seconds. Think about it. Put it in the chat. Let's see what we get. Good, grade 8s, well done. So either you're saying you're adding -2 or you're subtracting 2. I really don't mind. We can see that because from 5 to 3, we subtract 2 or we add -2. From 3 to 1, we subtract 2. So if we wanted to describe this pattern in words, we are subtracting 2 or, like I say, adding -2. Both are absolutely fine. I say subtracting 2, but adding -2 is absolutely fine, perfectly correct. Okay, so the next question, hopefully nice and easy, it says fill in the missing value for an input of 4. So basically I want to know what this value is here in the block. So have a think, tell me what you think your output is when your input is 4. So carry on that pattern. Okay, good, grade 8. So if we carry on this pattern and we subtract 2 again, 1 minus 2 is -1. So when we've got an input value of 4, our output value is -1. Very nice. Okay. So the next thing we want to do is we want to find an We want to find an algebraic rule. So remember, the first thing that we start with is we multiply x by whatever we're adding or subtracting. Now we know that we're subtracting 2 each time. So I'm going to say -2 times x to get -2x. But that is only the first part of my rule. I still need to do more. So the second step is I still need to ask myself, what should I still add or subtract to get the output that I want? Now, how do I determine that? Let's start with what we have. I've got -2 times x. If I take my first input 1 and I substitute that in place of x, because remember, that's what 1 is, it's x. And I say, whoops, sorry. Who knows why I decided to do that? And I say -2 times 1. I get a product of -2. Now my output that I want is 5. We can see that here. I want an output of 5. So my question is, how do I go from -2 to +5? What should I add or subtract? I can see Teto's on it tonight. If we're not there just yet, that's okay. If we think about our number line, we're at -2. We want to get to +5. so let's work up our number line and let's figure out what I need to add or subtract in order to get there. So at -2, I need to get to +5. So I'm going to add numbers. Whoops, maybe I should do that properly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I need to add 7 to -2 in order to get 5. That then leads me rather to getting my rule that says to me that if I want to get my output of y, I need to follow the rule of -2 times x plus 7. Now remember, we want to double check ourselves. We're not just going to believe that we've got this right. We always want to double check. Now you don't double check with all of them, check with one. So if we take x is equal to 2, we want to get a y value of 3. So if I substitute this in, y is equal to -2 times 2 plus 7. I'm just going to take my number line off here. -2 times 2 is -4 plus 7. -4 plus 7 is 3. Look at that. We got exactly the y value that we wanted. We said we wanted y equals 3. We got y equals 3. That's the output that we were looking for. And so what that tells me is that my rule is correct. All right, so now I could use that rule for anything. All right, there's a couple questions on the chat that I'm just going to quickly deal with. The first one was, how did we find the input value of 4? So let's just have a look here quickly. Let's get another color going here. So this input value for 4 over here, all I did was I carried on my pattern. So my pattern was to subtract 2. I said 1 minus 2, and I got my output value of -1. So I just carried on my pattern. Second question is, how did we get the 5? So remember, my question was, how do I get from -2 to 5? I got 5 because that was the value given to me as the output in the table. That was given to me, right? I didn't make it up. I got given that value. And so that 5 is the specific output that I needed to look for. So the 5 didn't come from anywhere. We were given 5. So I've just explained how we got 5. If you didn't get it, make sure you watch the recording. All right, guys, so it now tells us to use our rule to find the missing values of A and B. So let's just figure out where and what that is, what we're doing. So A and B, if we go back up to our table, are input values. I know that they're input values because they're in the first row. Right, before I carry on, again, grade 8, telling me that you don't understand, you're confused, you don't know what's going on, I can't help with that. So I need specific questions that you put in the chat, or you need to wait until I say hands up and then you can ask me, but specific questions. Unfortunately, I can't re-explain everything. If you need an explanation of everything, make sure you get the recording. All right. So guys, if we go back to this idea of finding the values of A and B, and what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to rewrite this question up here so that we can see everything that we've got. So we want to find the values of A and B. Okay. So if we want to do that, remember A and B, as I've said, are X values. I know that they're X values because of where they're sitting in the table. So I'm essentially asking you, what are the input values in order for me to get those specific output values? Now, if you think of this rule like a flow diagram, remember, we start with an input, we put it into our rule. The first thing that we did was we times by -2. And then the next thing that we did was we added 7. And that gave us our output value. What I'm now doing is I'm giving you the output value. So I'm telling you that my output value is -39. We need to work backwards to work out what X is. So that's essentially what we want to do. Now I'm going to use the flow diagram to help us with A, but I'll show you another way that we can find our output value, our input value with B. So there's two ways to do it. I'm going to show you one way with A. I'm going to show you another way with B. You can do it however you want. Right, if we're going to use the flow diagram idea, we want to work backwards. What that means is that we need to use opposite operations or inverse operations. So if this was a +7, working backwards, I need to subtract 7. And if I'm timesing -2 originally, working backwards, I need to divide by -2. So let's do that. -39 minus another 7. That gives me -46. Then I want to take that -46 and I want to divide it by -2. Now remember, negative divided by negative is a positive, so I'm going to get a positive answer here. And 46 divided by 2 is 23. And so what we've worked out is that my input value is 23. Now you can always go and double check yourself. How can you double check yourself? Well, you've got a rule. Remember, our rule was y is equal to 2x plus 7. So let's check. Y is equal to, yes, minus 2x plus 7. So I'm going to replace x with the 23. So y is equal to -2 times positive 23 plus 7. -2 times -23 is -46. -46 plus 7 is -39. What we see is that we're getting exactly the same output value that we were given. -39, -39. So I have correctly worked out my x value. Right, so that's one way to do it if you want to go and work with a flow diagram idea. So what we've established here is that this A value in my table is 23. Right, another way to do this is to use the equation. So I'll make this small and you can take screenshots now in a second. Another way to do this, and we're going to do this with B now, is to use our rule. So y is equal to -2x plus 7. Remember, I am looking for x. Oh, come on. So I'm looking for x, and if we go back up to our table, we can see that we were given the y value. We were given the output. That therefore means that I can substitute that in place of y. So if you started with solving equations, hopefully you'll be a little bit more comfortable with this, but I can replace y with -79 because I know that's what the y value is. And I can then solve for x. Right, now remember, solving for x, we still use opposite operations or inverse operations. So we're doing the same thing as what we did with our flow diagram. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to deal with that 7. So I'm going to subtract 7 on both sides. -79 minus 7 is equal to -2x. -79 minus 7 is -86. The next thing that I'm going to do, remember inverse operations, is I'm going to divide both sides by -2. That will essentially get me x alone. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. 86 divided by 2 is 43. And so what I've worked out is that my input value is 43, which means the B value up here is 43. Again, you can always double check yourself. If you just substitute it into a formula, y is equal to, come on, okay, y is equal to -2 times 43 plus 7. -2 times positive 43 is -86. We'll get there in the end. I don't know. Okay, -86 plus 7. Oh, come on. No one's fighting with you.
We are getting there. We can still see it though.
Plus 7. -86 plus 7 is -79. that is exactly the same output value as what we were given. So we have checked and we have gotten that correct. All right. So guys, you can always check with your rules. Okay, good, well done. I see answers coming through. If you feel like I'm going too fast, remember guys, you can request to go to a slower class, but you also just need to say so. But I'm really just explaining everything step by step. So I don't think I'm going too fast, but if you feel I am, then just say so and why you think I'm going too fast, and then we can slow it down. All right, so, oh, we had a lot going on here. I'm gonna just make that bigger for you guys to take a screenshot of question 2 of everything that we've done there. Right, if anyone has questions, now's the time to ask me. So you can raise your hands. If you don't know what's going on, remember I need a specific question so that I can help you. Unfortunately, non-specific doesn't help. But also remember, guys, we do record the lesson, so you are welcome to rewatch the lessons. Is it cool, Claire? There should be a pop-up to unmute yourself. There we go. What's your question? Alrighty. Question on the chat, how do you get to the rule? Grade 8s, I don't know why we're not listening. I'm going to be honest. But how do we get to the rule? So this is where we, if we follow these 3 steps. So the rule, obviously subtracting 2 is important. So I start by timesing x and whatever we add or subtract. From there, I need to figure out how I get from the product to the output that I want. So remember, 2 times the input of 1 is -2, but I want an output of 5. So I needed to ask myself how I got from -2 to 5. Well, I added 7, and so that's how I got to my rule. All right, I just followed the 3 steps that we did here in question 1. The x and 2x is the input. Okay, it comes from the table. Didn't I completely hear you? It is a lot to take in, and yes, I completely agree. Practice will help. We're going to do a whole nother lesson of this on Wednesday, so don't stress. Keisha, let's just double check something here. So when you're timesing, you've got a double negative there. It's not a double negative, it's -2. I've just chosen to put it into brackets, but you're not working with a double negative. It's -2 times 43, because that's the rule. Remember, the rule is -2x plus 7. So if it was a double negative, yes, I absolutely agree with you, but it's just a negative, 1 negative. Watobe, in terms of will this work, I assume you mean the method that we've outlined here in the steps. It will work with any pattern that we're adding or subtracting the same value each time. All right, so that method will work when we're adding the same number or subtracting the same number each time from one term to the next. Alrighty, guys, we're not going to have time for a full brain break, but I want you guys to just take 60 seconds, get up, stretch, move, make sure you've got your screenshots, and then we're going to have a look at another example, because as Didn't says, this is practice, is very important. I think, yeah, everyone just take a quiet 60 seconds, and then we'll come back and we'll do some more practice.
Yep, stretch, y'all deserve it. But you guys, oh, I'm so proud of you. You're getting it. You are really, really getting it. Smart people. stretch wherever you are, and I hope that you feel a little bit calm. Yes, it is a lot to take in. That's how we learn, right? Then it will become easy and easy, especially if you haven't studied this at school. It might be really, really difficult for you. Teto, we definitely are having our break now. Wow, I'm stretching. Oof. No, Luno, we don't comment like that, Luno. Definitely the next one, you have to answer the question, okay? When we have questions so that we can make you love math. Okay, when we have questions, Luno, Sam is our man or our lady to come and actually answer the questions. Okay, guys, let's enjoy. We are back again. Let's do this, my people.
Alrighty, guys, let us have a look at another example. Right. Okay, we're changing up some things here. We're not gonna, okay, whatever, doesn't matter. Right, there we go. Ignore this. I'm gonna take it away, ignore this. Righto, so here we've got our table again. Remember that if we're talking about the position of the term, we're talking about x. If we go back to, say, for example, the example that we did here, that's essentially what x is. It's your first term, your second term, your third term, your fourth term. It is the position of the term in that sequence. So our table here, we've still got x and y values, all right? So once again, what we want to do is we want to look at our y values and we want to figure out what the pattern is here. So take a second, take a look. What is the pattern for this, or for these outputs rather? My English tonight is just... Good, well done, guys. So we can see that we're adding 3 each time. Golly. Right, so 7 plus 3 is 10. 10 plus 3 is 13, and so we keep going. So that means that we could fill in these missing blocks here. All right, so in the chat, I want you to give me the next 3 terms. So what is the 5th term, the 6th term? I don't know why I'm writing it here, but anyways, the 7th term. So you can just write it in a list for me, like Lunofefe has done there in the chat, or you can write it like Cornelia is doing, 5, 6, 7, whatever. But I want those next 3 terms according to our pattern that we have. Good, guys, well done. Keep them coming. Right, so if we add 3 to 16, we get 19. We add 3 to 19, we get 22. We add 3 to 22, we get 25. So again, great. We could just keep adding 3 and extend our pattern, but we don't want to extend this pattern to the 100th term if that's what we've been asked. And so what we want to be able to do is find a rule. Okay, so remember our rule, first thing that we start with is we start by saying whatever we're adding or subtracting, sure, times by x. So we're going to start with a product of 3x. Right, the next thing that I need to do is I need to figure out how I get from negative 3x, adding or subtracting what I need to get my output. So if I take 3x and I use my first input of 1, and I substitute that in place of x, I get a product of 3. But have a look, if you go back to a table, that is not the output you want. The output you want is 7. So how do I get from 3 to 7? Well, I add 4. So this is telling me that my rule should read something like y is equal to 3x. And now we have to have that there because remember, this 3, this coefficient of 3 is coming from me adding 3. That's very important. That's my whole pattern. So we've got 3x, but we also know we need to add 4 in order to get the output that we want. Now, we always just double check ourselves. It's always good to check. It's always good to make sure that we've done this correctly. So we're going to check with our next input value of 2. X equals 2. We want to make sure that we get a y or an output value of 10. All right. If we take our rule, y is equal to 3x plus 4, we get, what do we get? Right, y is equal to 3 times 2 plus 4. 3 times 2 is 6, and 6 plus 4 is 10. What did we want? Well, we said we wanted an output value of 10. That's what we wanted. We got an output value of 10, and so our rule is correct. Okay, so when finding our pattern, we need to know exactly what we're adding or subtracting, but we do need to do a little bit of extra work. All right, so I'm going to just add a little question here. Whoopsie daisies. That I want you guys to try. It's causing chaos everywhere. Okay, so what is the value of the 25th term in the... So I want you guys to try that question. What is the value of the 25th term in the pattern? Now read it carefully. Basically what I'm asking you is, if you extended this pattern all the way to the 25th term, what is the value? What is the output value for that? I want you to try that by yourselves. Tohiro, the 2 came in because I just checked with my next input value. So the 2 is from the table. And remember, guys, you've got a rule. We've worked out a rule. Use that rule. It's useful to us. Good, grade 8. Very nicely done. Okay, so if we take our rule, now remember I'm saying the 25th term, so I'm giving us an input. So I'm telling us that x is equal to 25. That means that I need to take this x value that I have been given, work with me here, and I need to substitute it in place of the x in my equation. So that's exactly what I do. Y is equal to 3 times 25 plus 4. 3 times 25 is 75. And 75 plus 4 gives me an output value of, as you've all said, 79. So what this is saying is, if x is equal to 25, then y is equal to 79. If my input is 25, or if I'm looking for the 25th term, that will be a value, or that will give me an output of 79. Okay, so using your rule is very, very important. Let's see if we can do another one. Right, so I'm going to add it down here at the bottom. And now I have to do some quick maths here. Whoopsie daisies. I'm going to fall off this chair one day, and it's going to be in the middle of one of our lessons, and you can all laugh at me because madness.
Don't jinx it.
Okay. Which term in the sequence, which term in the pattern will have a value of, I don't think I've spelled many words right there. Let's just double check. Of. Okay, so that's the next question I want you guys to try. Again, you've got a formula, you've got a pattern. It's quite useful to us. Let's use it. So this is the next question. Which term in the pattern will have a value of 94? So I'm giving you the value. So I'm telling you the value of the term is going to be 94. Chosen highlighters for whatever reason. I want to know the input value. I want to know which term it's going to be. Give it a try. Yo, grade 8, you're on it. You're making my life much easier than the first class, I can tell you that much. Luckily, I love you all. Righto. Keep those answers coming. And remember, like Yolanda always says in our lessons, make sure that you're doing the writing and the working out in your book. It's important that you can show your working out. So when I say you're working out, like what we did over here, you need to be able to show the substitution and all of the working out. Good, grade 8s. Okay, good. So let's have a look. Then we use our rule. Y is equal to 3x plus 4. The difference now, though, is I'm telling you that y is equal to 94. So I substitute that in, and now I'm solving for x. So I'm using inverse operations. Very, very important. So the first thing I do, subtract 4 on both sides. When I subtract 4 on both sides, I end up with 90 is equal to 3x. My goal is to solve for x, so I need to divide both sides by 3. And as all of you have put there wonderfully on the chat for me, we get that x is equal to 30, because 90 divided by 3 is 30. Okay, so we can use this rule to pretty much either work out a specific term or to work out which position a term that I give you is in. So being able to find these rules, very, very important.